What's up? Welcome back into the Lettermen live show. It is Thursday. It is 6:30. That means Andy Backstrom's on the other side of the screen. I'm Spencer Holbrook. Andy, man, it's finally here. It feels like game day a little bit. Not quite into South Bend yet, but Lettermen Row will be making its way over there. How you feeling?
Feeling great. I know it's not last year's opener where it was like everyone wanted to talk about it the entire offseason, but this is the game we had circled on our calendar as like the first real matchup game, as Ohio State calls it. But for us, Spencer, you mentioned it. Like, this is why we do what we do as well. This is why they play the game. But for us as journalists covering the game, being there in that atmosphere, I can't wait. I know you can't either. So, yeah, let's get it going. Let's start talking about it.
It's so interesting to me, Andy, because like you look at the slate for next week or for next year with Ohio State, like the 2024 non-con, and it's so like depressing, right? So like 2020, we were supposed to get Oregon. 2021, Oregon came to Columbus. 2022, we get Notre Dame coming to Columbus to play Ohio State, and we get excited for that one. 2023, hey, 3 weeks in the lead up to South Bend, and then you go there on the road, big night game. CJ Stroud's not going to be there. Jackson Smith and Jigba's not going to be there. Years in advance because they were just that type of talent. And then all of a sudden, it's like 2024. I don't know, man. It sucks. So I'm going to cherish this one. This last non-con for a couple years, and also maybe the last non-con big time game that we could see from Ohio State. Like, hey, if the Big Ten goes to 10, who's to say that Ohio State's going to go schedule a Notre Dame, an out of conference Oregon, even though they'll be in the league, so they won't have a choice. But the Alabamas, the Texases that are supposed to be on that slate in a couple years, like, who knows, man? So I'm all that to say, I'm going to cherish this one.
Yeah, I wasn't even about until really today when Andrew Gillis from Cleveland.com, friend of the show, asked Ryan Day the question in the lightning round today. Like, yeah, what is the future of non-con scheduling for these kinds of games? These matchup games where it's two marquee programs going face to face, in a great environment. And, the Big Ten is expanding so large, 18 teams. There are only going to be so many non-conference games to go around, and you're going to want to have those gimme games where you just, you play your Ohio Bobcats or, more relevantly, like I guess this year, the Youngstown State Penguins. Like, you're going to have those games where teams are going to want to pay you or you're going to pay them basically to come to Ohio State, and you're going to beat them by 50 points. And that's just going to be that. So I guess it is a good question to be asked. Like, Ryan Day didn't really give a definitive answer. Obviously, he's so focused on this week. But I think it got his mind kind of thinking a little bit like, oh, yeah, I mean, I don't know what's going to look like.
So let's get into that. You talk about Ryan Day and the way that he was today. I love taking stock of a coach's demeanor. Like you see, like I talked about it on I think the Tuesday video, it might have been Wednesday. Like there's Michigan Ryan Day, there's Georgia Ryan Day, and then there's every other game they know they're going to win Ryan Day. Where are you at on the Ryan Day scale right now?
Yeah, I agree with you. Tim was saying this as well. Tim May, Lettermen Row's senior writer, was saying, it feels like the Georgia week. It feels like he's dialed in, but not so much where it's a tense kind of dialed in. It's more of a loose, let it fly. We know what we have. And I think that's really important to note, that nuance, because it's a fine line. And obviously there's a lot of pressure on this game. Ohio State has a lot to prove. Number 6 in the country, but sliding in the polls the first 2 weeks of the season. Didn't move up last week after winning by 53 points. I was a little bit surprised that they didn't move up to 5 or something like that after a pretty convincing performance. I know it was Western Kentucky, but they looked pretty darn good. They still have a lot to prove on a national stage. This is their opportunity to do it. But Ryan Day seems to be confident in what he has, and I think the way they played last week on both sides of the ball is a big reason why.
Absolutely. I mean, you go out and drop 63 on a Western Kentucky team and hold that type of offense to 10. I don't care that it's group of five. Like, that's a group of five team. That's a very good group of five team. That's a team that I think is going to win its league. That's a team that friends of the show might have some coin on them winning the league. Like, confident in Western Kentucky being good, and Ohio State went out there and decimated that team, and like that should give you confidence. If you went out and did another 35-7, you might go into this game kind of scratching your head on the identity of this team. But like, I think Ryan Day is pretty confident in what the identity is. He's confident in Kyle McCord as a signal caller. He's confident that that quarterback's going to be able to get the playmakers the ball, that Travion's going to be able to run through some holes. The offensive line is coming together. I'm not saying it's a finished product, but like the defense looked really good. Like you would not hear this from Ryan Day if this was in week 3 after the Youngstown State game. But thank God for Ohio State that it's week 4 and it's after Western Kentucky where you went out and you kind of showed everybody like, hey, like don't forget about us. I know we got to go on the road, but like don't forget about us. So I just think that there's a certain level of confidence right now that this team has, and that really showed out this week, I think, in their head coach.
The schedule really folded pretty well for Ohio State, right? You get week 1, you play Indiana, you go on the road. It's a test, and in a certain way, you're almost if you're Ohio State looking back at it now, you're almost happy that it didn't go maybe splendidly, because if you win that game 56-10, like they normally beat Indiana, well then you get some complacency potentially. Maybe some guys are like, oh, we got this. We're dialed in again. And then maybe you roll past Youngstown State and you roll past Western Kentucky and you come into week 4 and yeah, you might be the number 3 team in the country still, but you really haven't been tested with adversity. And sometimes that adversity is your own self, right? I mean, a lot of the time we always say it, the team that can beat Ohio State is Ohio State. In these matchup games, it's actually the opponent because there is such a high level of talent on the other roster. But in those first 3 weeks, the only team that could beat Ohio State was Ohio State. And obviously they didn't get beat, but there were definitely times in which they were kicking themselves in the shoe or in the foot, wherever you want to call it, and they didn't look pretty. And I think now you're getting to the point where like you're almost looking back on that with a little bit of gratitude, because the way the schedule unfolded, you did have that time where you couldn't get complacent because you only won 23-3 against Indiana and you only won 35-7 against Youngstown State.
Yeah, it's kind of like the last matchup game they played, right? Like you say, like the only team that's going to beat Ohio State. Well, even in these matchup games, like if Ohio State doesn't lose its cool on a play that makes them have a 1st and 25, if Ohio State doesn't miss a tackle on a routine curl route on a 3rd down, if Ohio State doesn't leave a guy completely wide open over the top, like you're talking about a team that probably doesn't let that Michigan game get out of hand in the second half and is probably maybe even the number 1 seed in the college football playoff last year. You're talking about a team that, tripped over its own foot literally against Georgia in the 4th quarter. And I wrote a column on LettermenRow.com January 1 at like 4:30 in the morning, up in the Weston Peachtree, that like the only team that beat Ohio State in the Peach Bowl was Ohio State, because Ohio State's defense beat Ohio State's offense. Ohio State was like 600-0 all time when scoring 40 points as a program until the Georgia game. They had never lost a game in which they scored 40 points. They scored the 40. They just couldn't get the stuff. So like all that to say is like even in the matchup games, like a lot of times if Ohio State loses, it's a lot of time on Ohio State. And the Clemson game 2019, you're kicking field goals, you're not scoring touchdowns. And that's obviously on Clemson's defense, but your offense not getting the job done. 2020 against Alabama, I would say Alabama just beat you. Like 2021 Oregon, you're just not covering a certain play, so they just keep running it. Like a lot of times, like Ohio State beats Ohio State. And so, I just think that it's interesting that these matchup games happen because, again, even in the matchup games, like a lot of times, just go do what you're supposed to do and you're probably going to win because you're one of the 3 most talented teams in the country. And this is no different. Like I even told Mike Singer of Blue and Gold Illustrated, does a great job covering them. Like Ohio State has the talent advantage, and I'm not afraid to say that on a Notre Dame show. Like it's not a secret. So, Ohio State can beat Notre Dame handily if Ohio State takes care of business with the talent that it has. But that's a whole different story.
Certainly, yeah, and I think like it's a whole different story, and especially because it's only week 4. Like as much as they've grown, and coaches always say you want to win and learn, and I think Ohio State has done that so far. But again,
Absolutely.
This is still Kyle McCord's 5th career start. This is still this offensive line's 4th career start together as a collective unit. So it's just one of those things where you have to kind of like, yes, the talent is there, but this is still a new season. This is still a new group of guys in different places for some of them. And how are they going to perform collectively on a Saturday night in South Bend? We truly just don't know yet. Like ultimately this game comes down to the quarterback position in every space of the game, every time of the game. If your quarterback doesn't show up, like, you probably aren't going to win unless your defense puts the team on its back with, I don't know, 4 or 5 takeaways, right? So Kyle McCord needs to make plays on Saturday. We all believe he can. I mean, he's certainly talented and capable of doing so. He's prepared for big games before, but we really don't know until it happens. We really just have to see if he can play into this and be the guy for Ohio State. And a lot of what he's done the last couple of weeks have given people confidence around the building, of course, and fans confidence. But until he does it, that is the question mark, because, that's going to be the difference ultimately.
Absolutely. And, Kyle McCord being protected, Kyle McCord having time, Kyle McCord delivering the ball on time, not getting too tripped up in the moment and being caught up in 80,000 and touchdown Jesus ahead above you and, just that atmosphere, prime time. The big lights are literally on. So EJP asks, can our offensive tackles protect McCord? I've been feeling McCord will be pressured just like JT Barrett was pressured versus Virginia Tech. That's, to me, the biggest question. Like, I'll give you guys a little preview here for the people watching. Thank you for watching, seriously. My offensive player of the game in this game on tomorrow's bold predictions video is Josh Simmons, because I picked Ohio State to win. I don't think that's a secret. I don't think people would expect me to pick Notre Dame based on what I just said about the talent. But, like, if Ohio State's going to win, it has to be because of Kyle McCord and Josh Simmons. Like, can you protect Kyle McCord? And if you can, he's going to, I think, have a great game. If you can't and he gets rattled early, then you're talking about a whole different ball game. And that's where I draw the line here. It's like, if they're going to win, it's going to be because they kept him clean and they didn't allow a good, not great pass rush to take advantage of a good, not great offensive line.
Yeah, I mean, when I'm looking at this Ohio State offensive line, I'm more concerned this week about the run blocking. I actually think they have a great opportunity to run block pretty well and put things together and actually have a good game on the ground. But I'm not too concerned about the pass protection. I'm just not. I think that, going to the season, that's what we were concerned about. We were like, can they protect whoever is playing quarterback, whether it's Kyle McCord or Devin Brown? From the first game on, we figured out, hey, that's not the problem. It's, can they run block consistently, especially in those short yardage situations? As far as Notre Dame goes, you mentioned, like, this is not the greatest Notre Dame pass rush. Now, I think they're better than what the stats show in terms of sacks per game. I think they're 106th. They're at least tied for that in terms of sacks per game, only around 1.5. But when you look at the pressures, they've got 70 total across 4 games. And a lot of those pressures are coming on the inside. So they're either sending backers up the middle. JT Bertrand is one of those guys they like to send. He's their Mike linebacker. And then some of their defensive tackles as well have no problem getting to the quarterback. But as far as the edge goes, I mean, Javonte Jean-Baptiste is probably their top defensive end right now. Like, this team does not have an Isaiah Foskey who had back-to-back seasons with 11 sacks. Like, they don't have that alpha pass rusher yet. And so at this point, like, I'm not as concerned about guys coming off the edge and wreaking havoc on Josh Simmons on one side and Josh Fryer on the other. I think, if anything, Notre Dame will have more success getting pressure up the middle if they get any kind of pressure on Kyle McCord. But this Ohio State offensive line has been good in pass pro. Kyle McCord's only been pressured on 13 of 80 dropbacks so far this season. That's not been the problem. The problem has been run blocking, and I think that's going to be the key this Saturday.
Yeah, that's why I went back through I watched the tape. I did the work, Andy, and watched that Central Michigan game. Central Michigan had some success on the ground against Notre Dame. Ohio State, like, what do you got? If Central Michigan can do it, you can do it. And I know that there's a different level of energy. There's a different level of adrenaline that goes through a defensive tackle or a defensive end when you're playing Central Michigan versus when you are playing Ohio State. Like, that's just not a secret. But also, if Central Michigan can do it all amped up, because I know Central Michigan was amped up for that game, then Ohio State can move Notre Dame on the ground. You have to, because you can't have Kyle McCord drop back 50 times. I suppose you could, because I think Ohio State will get theirs, through the air. But like, you got to be able to run the ball. Central Michigan did a good job of it. A couple quarterback power I thought was an interesting concept that they ran. Where they found a hole in the scheme where Notre Dame would send a guy through the A gap along with the defensive tackle slant that way. And Central Michigan would let that happen, let that play develop, and then there's a big hole for a quarterback to run quarterback power. You can do the same thing with Travion Henderson. I think zone read option is a great way to neutralize and help your offensive line get comfortable blocking in this type of environment. Don't be surprised if you see a couple of those early on in the game from Ohio State. And I think, the outside stretch, not just stretch where they just hand it off where it's very predictable, but the outside stuff with Travion where you let him pick his hole instead of making him go through one and hoping the offensive line opens it up. Like, there's ways to settle into a game like this, right? And I think that Ohio State, that's part of the aggression that Ryan Day talks about. It's not just going out there and airing it out, rolling C.J. Stroud out and throwing it to Marvin Harrison Jr. for 2 touchdowns early in the game against Georgia. It's, finding ways to be aggressive in the running game and being able to exploit things with Notre Dame's defense, get your offensive line comfortable. So when you need that 3rd and 1 in the third quarter and you're up 3, you can get it because you've got the confidence that you built from those runs in the first quarter.
Yeah, and we've seen glimpses of this offensive line being good in the run blocking department. I think week 3, of course, against Western Kentucky, that defensive line, we've talked about it time and time again. That's not a very good defensive line. But there was signs of progress, and if you're Ohio State, you're hoping that continues against Notre Dame. The problem week 1 and week 2, well, you mentioned it, like it was linear. It wasn't linear in progression, right? You were seeing some things better one week and then other things not so good the next week. Week 1, it was kind of some missed assignments, miscommunication, point of attack. Week 2 was some penalties that cost them some yards. I think with week 1, though, that's what's really got me thinking with Indiana, because they also did a lot of stunts, showed different fronts. They sent linebackers as well, blitzing. I think Notre Dame does a lot of the same stuff in terms of just throwing a lot at you with Al Golden and that defense. And especially with those linebackers coming in, they blitz a lot, especially on pass snaps, but they will blitz on run snaps as well. And so I guess the key is when you're zone blocking, like who is picking up maybe that extra guy that's coming in. And I think that's what I'm curious to see with this offensive line, because a lot of it's just, time together and knowing who's picking up who, communicating. And it's such a loud environment on the road. That's obviously something that you got to be aware of. And we're going to talk later about Carson Hinsman, but I think that's what is huge for this game too. We talk all about Kyle McCord making his first start in a matchup game, primetime. Carson Hinsman is an anchor of this offensive line, or at least needs to be. The center is such an important position, especially in an environment like that. And I feel like that narrative is really going under the radar right now, but I think that's a huge storyline for this week.
Yeah, let's talk about it. You brought it up. Let's talk about it. I agree. Like, you had a snap infraction. You haven't had a snap infraction on the road yet because you haven't had to go on the road in a tough environment. You haven't had a false start or a delay game because you didn't get the ball snap because you haven't been on the road in a tough environment yet. You haven't had to withstand 2nd and 15 because of those mistakes because you have not been in this environment yet. I am of the opinion that it will not be a 77,000 fan Notre Dame crowd. Buckeye Nation, tell me in the comments, tell me on Twitter, tell me on Facebook, tell your grandma to tell me on Facebook. I don't know. But, I think that Ohio State fans will travel well. And if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. But I read a story about Notre Dame trying to limit the amount of Ohio State fans getting in and how they can mitigate that and make it a true home field advantage for Notre Dame. I just don't see how that's possible. Ohio State hasn't been over there since 1996. Ohio State fans are clamoring to go back to Iowa City. They haven't been there since 2017. You think they're not going to travel and pay a lot of money to go watch the Buckeyes in South Bend? So I don't think that the crowd noise is as big of a factor, but it's certainly still a factor for a first-time starting quarterback and a first-time center together making that first start. And you've got to get the snap right. You got to control your motion. You got to hear Kyle McCord's clap. You got to get the snap down, and you got to block all in one while there's at least 60,000, maybe 50 or 60,000 fans screaming at the top of their lungs for you not to do that job. So, it's not as much can Carson Hinsman do it because, somebody says he's playing good football. I agree. I think he's playing really good football right now considering his circumstance and being his only 3 career starts. But this is not the same type of start.
Yeah, it's been a great start for him, I think. It's a big role to fill for Luke Lippler that goes into the NFL draft early. That was a surprise for everyone in the building, outside of the building. And Carson Hinsman was not who we were talking about until it was the NFL Combine. And we were asking Luke Lippler, who's next? And we were all expecting Jacob James. And, Carson Hinsman's name was thrown out there. he was one of 3 true freshmen last year not to play a snap. And here he now 3 games already as a redshirt freshman, looking quite impressive. But as you said, it's just a different beast Saturday night at Notre Dame. The other thing I was thinking too is like, look, they've taken the ball the last 2 games after winning the coin toss, and that was a shift in terms of philosophy. And I guess one thing, I'd be really curious to see is those games were partially about playing time, style points, wanting to be cognizant of the clock. In a game like this where the clock really doesn't matter as much, you just want to get out there with a win. That's the most important thing. Do you take the ball to start against Notre Dame on the road, especially with a center like Carson Hinsman that doesn't have the experience and a quarterback in Kyle McCord that hasn't started in a game like this at the college level? Or do you rely on your defense to get a first stop and try to create some momentum that way? It's just something that I've been thinking about today.
You're 3 of 3 right now on opening drive touchdowns. As inconsistent as this offense was against Indiana, it marched down the field and scored an opening drive touchdown. As inconsistent as it was at times with the quarterback swap and everything against Youngstown State, it got an opening drive touchdown. Against Western Kentucky, it got an opening drive touchdown on a good scripted drive. If you feel confident in your script, I'm taking the ball. Like, you can set the tone. You can quiet a crowd. You can quiet a crowd with a first down. It doesn't have to be a touchdown that quiets a crowd. You've crossed the 50, and that crowd gets a little quieter. You get in the red zone, that crowd gets a little quieter. Then you get down to the goal line, and that crowd gets a little louder, but you only got a couple yards to go. And then all of a sudden, you trust that your defense can get that stop. You get the ball back, and you can go up 14-0. You can go up 10-0. I think you take the ball. If Ryan Day is going to be aggressive, attacking, letting it all hang out, as our good friend Tim May likes to say, that Ryan Day approach, the Georgia Ryan Day. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but like I would take the ball. You can set the tone. Like you can also show your quarterback who's probably going to be pretty nervous. You can show your center who's going to be nervous, your tackles who are nervous. Like, hey, we trust you enough. You guys are going to go down and score. Let's take the ball and go score. And that would be my thought process.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of trust that's shown in that situation. I think that's super key. The other thing is it's possible they don't win the toss, right? And then you might have to go out there anyway.
Let's not get carried away.
Yeah. Well, you never know. But if that happens, like this is also an opportunity for the defense to make a statement. And then if you get a stop, let's say you force a 3 and out, that's a way to quiet the crowd immediately. And then you're giving the ball back to your offense with maybe a little bit more tame crowd there and an opportunity to get things in motion a little bit more seamlessly. So it's just an interesting thing to think about because like it is a different environment and it's a different circumstances because we've talked way too much, at least in my opinion, about the clock the first 3 weeks. And I'm just happy now that we're in a game where like it doesn't matter how many possessions they get. All that matters is who wins. Like I think that there's some beauty in that. But there's also gamesmanship in that, right? Because, it's also just about like, how do you want to start a game like this on the road in this kind of matchup? And I'll be watching at that coin toss. Everyone's going to be tweeting about it, Spencer. We know it. Everyone's going to tweet who wins the toss. It always happens.
Ohio State 3-0 on coin tosses this year. One of my goals for tomorrow on Friday, if you're listening to this Friday, today, I guess, is to figure out what Ryan Day is on coin tosses. I've tweeted every coin toss of the Ryan Day era. I've never missed one. I track the percentage. They've been, I think, 4-8 one year in coin tosses. They've been 8-4 one year on coin tosses. Right now they're 3-0. So if you're wondering out there, I will be watching because I'm a weirdo. Which is going to take us to Keys of the Game, Andy. I actually wrote Keys of the Game this week, how Buckeyes can beat Notre Dame. It's over on lettermenrow.com. I would highly suggest you go check it out, where you can get 50% off your first year right now of the membership. Come join the crew at Lettermen Row. Matt Parker in the comments. What up, Matt? I have 3 keys to the game. I'm just going to run through them. You tell me what you think the number one of these 3 are. Ohio State must protect Kyle McCord, give him time in the pocket. It's pretty self-explanatory. The Buckeyes have to keep Notre Dame behind on the chains, and they must take the fight to Notre Dame. You can't sit back and let Notre Dame bring that to you. Which one do you think is the most of the 3?
Yeah, I think the third is the most like abstract, but I do think it's the most important because as much as Ryan Day has been talking about letting it rip, as Tim wrote today, and just letting it all hang out. Like, I think that you can say that, but then doing it is another thing. Because I even felt like with the Michigan game, it's not like he wasn't saying those things. It just didn't happen. Like Georgia, he said it and it did happen. There was that passion, that fire. They get out to a 21-7 lead, and they look like they were going to go to the national championship for all of 3 quarters. In this game, like, is he going to come out living by his word? Is he going to be pushing the ball downfield with Kyle McCord? Is he going to be, taking chances with his play calling? Because that is really where he had that masterful performance against Georgia, calling plays. And that's why people kind of really gave him some grace after that performance, after really being critical of him against Michigan and being so passive. So I think it's the third one, because you have to come out with some fight and you have a chance to make a statement here. Like, as close as I think it is in terms of talent, like, I think this Notre Dame team is very good. You do have a chance, like you said, Spencer, to win this game handily. If you're playing at their very best for Ohio State, they could come out and just punch Notre Dame right in the throat and walk away from South Bend with a multi-score victory. That's not the way I'm predicting it. I think it will be closer than that, but that's not to say it's not possible. But if you're going to do that, you need to come out with that fight, like you said.
Yeah, I think if Ohio State plays an A game and Notre Dame plays an A game, Ohio State wins. If Ohio State plays a B game and Notre Dame plays an A game, we'll talk. If Ohio State plays like B minus, I think you're in trouble, because I think Notre Dame will play well. So that's just you've got to be able to take the fight, like you said. I do want to continue to touch just a little bit on this offensive line, and keeping Kyle McCord clean is one of the keys to the game. Like, and again, we already talked about it a little bit, but like with Josh Simmons, I think he's answered a few questions already. I don't have as many like skepticisms in my head as I had at the beginning of the year, but also I fully understand that this was Youngstown State and Western Kentucky and Indiana, even where they did struggle. Um, just I think he has to come out and have a good first couple drives. Like, you can tell when he starts to cook a little bit on the offensive line and gets into a rhythm. You could see it. You watch even like the TV copy, and you can see, and you just go to YouTube and watch as the game wears on and he starts getting some run fits going. He looks pretty good. And so I think that it's so critical for this offense as a whole, but in particular for Josh Simmons, to get off to a great start. Like, if you don't get off to a great start, Notre Dame is going to be able to do some things defensively that nobody should be able to do to Ohio State.
Yeah, getting off to a great start also means not being called for penalties, right? We talked about it with that environment. It's not just Carson Hinsman, Josh Simmons too. He led the country on all tackles last year in penalties. He had 2 penalties against Youngstown State, and that kind of raised all the antenna of every reporter being like, uh-oh, is this the Josh Simmons from San Diego State that has trouble with penalties, and Justin Fry told us not to be worried about it? I don't know. I mean, that's the question, right? Because if you're getting off to a good start, that means you're staying ahead of schedule and you're not getting backed up 1st and 15, 2nd and 12. And the thing that's really going to be the culprit in those situations is penalties. I don't really see, Notre Dame is not high up in the country in tackles for loss. I think they only have like 17 across 4 games or something like that. They're not the team that's really jamming teams up in the backfield. It's going to be those penalties that set Ohio State back in that kind of atmosphere with a new look offensive line. And Josh Simmons is the center of that discussion. If he can end this game with 0 penalties, you have to be feeling good about his discipline. And again, it wasn't the procedural penalties last time. It was a holding call and illegal hands to the face. But this time around, I'm watching for the false starts.
Yeah, and that's a good one. Like, if he's not false starting, which is the main culprit from last year, I think you'll see a good Josh Simmons. I think he'll settle in. He's already starting to settle in. And San Diego State, it's a good program. They play on the road at Pac-12 schools. Shout out to the soon-to-be deceased Pac-12. They play Pac-12 schools all the time. Like, it's not like his first rodeo on like a big stage, but it is his first rodeo on the big stage as like a big primetime, let it all hang out type of game. So, just that's offensive line hour, I guess. That's a lot of ground covered on the offensive line. I don't know if you get that anywhere else. Andy had a couple other guys in the keys to game, Buckeyes to watch. However you want to describe this, like, who's another guy that you just think like, man, if he comes out and you see it from him, like, this is going to be a good night for Ohio State.
Mike Hall, because we've been kind of waiting for this breakout. I feel like this season. I mean, everything that he did at the start of last season, starting with the Notre Dame game, he was the one that came out and had 2 sacks in that game against Notre Dame, I believe, and just really set the tone of what he could be. And he looked like an All-American before he really was just too hampered by that injury last year with his shoulder. And it just feels like now going into this season, there was so much hype about him. He's the heart and soul of this defensive line. He is a vocal leader. You know, as quiet as some of these guys can be that are team captains. I mean, we know Tommy Eichenberg can be loud on the field, but it really feels like sometimes Mike Hall is the heart and soul, at least of that defensive front. And he's someone that can make a big difference on the road. And I think that if you're getting pressure on Sam Hartman, sometimes he can come up front in the middle there. It doesn't have to be JT Tuimoloau or Jack Sawyer. Those guys can help each other. And I'm watching for Mike Hall to finally have maybe a big game, maybe a little bit of an encore performance, if you will, from last year.
Yeah, he's playing really well so far, in not as many snaps as maybe I thought. I kind of beat the drum for him to get more snaps than Tyleik Williams, and all of a sudden now Tyleik Williams is playing really well. So like, it's just interesting to me, this defensive line rotation. I asked Jim Knowles about it, and he said he thinks that they're going to continue to do what they've been doing, and rightfully so because it's been working. But when your best players need to play their best, can they? And can Mike Hall do that? I'm very curious if that's something that can happen. You look at the Michigan State game last year. I think he had 8 snaps and he had like 3.5 sacks. One of them got called back, so he ended up with 2.5 sacks. And then in the Notre Dame game, he was playing with his hair on fire. But after that, I know there's injuries, but like, it just wasn't there, and he was never right the rest of the year. And so far this year, I think he's been good. Can you be great? Can you go be great against Notre Dame? Yeah, if he's playing well and you get just what you've been getting from Tyleik Williams, I think you're on to something with this defensive line, because the more Notre Dame has to worry about what's coming up the middle, like what NC State made them do, the easier it is to force Joe Alt into a bad decision or bad technique. The easier it is to put pressure on Blake Fisher. Those tackles are good. They're very good. Joe Alt is an incredible player, a first-round draft pick. He's also not impenetrable when it comes to blocking. So, like, if you can create some pressure up the middle and just make those tackles think about the inside pass rush, the inside run, trying to control those tackles, those defensive tackles, you're going to have more success from JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer. And maybe this is a Kenyatta Jackson game, and maybe it's time for Caden Curry. Like, I think that the key is to get that stuff up the middle. Make sure you solidify that with Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams and Ty Hamilton. Then you can work your way out.
It's not just the pass rush, too. It's the run defense, because Audric Estime is a bell cow. He's a big back. He's hard to tackle. He's pretty fast, too, for his size. And this defensive line, in addition to getting some pressure on Sam Hartman, is going to have to wrap up and swarm ball carriers, including Audric Estime. So I think when you're looking at the defensive line and Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams, it's also about, hey, can they actually make the stops they need to in the trenches there to turn maybe what is supposed to be a 5 or 6 yard carry for Audric Estime into a 3 or 4 yard carry. He's averaging over 8 yards a carry right now. Obviously, you can't allow that on Saturday. And I know he had like an 80-yard run that kind of inflates that a little bit. But the point is, he's second nationally in rushing yards per game right now. He's a really good back. And they've got Jeremiah Love, who's a true freshman there. He's really impressing already, and I know they love him there. So this is a talented backfield for Notre Dame, and it's a real test for this defensive front, but also the linebackers in Tommy Eichenberg and Steel Chambers.
Defensive line, just like, how are you handling Audric Estime? Like, that's a grown man. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. Like, he is massive. I was watching that again, the Central Michigan game. I crunching the tape as we do at LettermenRow.com, and like, he's running over people, and he's running over like 240-pound linebackers, 230-pound linebackers. Obviously, MAC players, but like, I'm not going to talk bad about those guys, and he's just making them look small. Not easy to do. I'm a big Audric Estime fan. It's a shame that Notre Dame doesn't let us down on the field pregame. I would love to see, up close what exactly what Ohio State's going to be tackling, because I don't know, man. I don't know what he reminds me of. I don't want to make like some crazy comparison. I don't think he's like Derrick Henry, but I also don't think he's small, like a smaller, like a one cut back, like a J.K. Dobbins. So like I don't know, man. He's pretty unique.
He's
He's got to
five.
he's definitely got to be somebody that they got to key on.
He's 5'11 and a half, 227. I mean, kind of like the Chip Trayanum build in just a physical comparison, I guess. But yeah, certainly has got a lot more elite speed. I mean, as fast as Chip can be in the open space. I mean, Audric Estime is someone that's obviously on your radar for NFL draft prospect at any time, I guess, going forward now. What is he now? He's a junior? Yeah, so he'll be eligible after this year. And I guess yeah, that's really the question for me. Like, how do they contain this Notre Dame run game? Because that's how this Notre Dame offense is built. It's through the run to set up the play action. It's not to say that Sam Hartman can't, pick and dump it off the power and pick out the zones and find the open receivers and throw guys open. Like, he can do that. But this offense is pro style. It's 12 personnel heavy. They'll do 13 personnel. They like the heavy packages. They like to run the ball, set up the play fake, and take their shots. And I think, you start by taking down the run, or at least limiting it to the degree in which your safeties and your cornerbacks can play a little bit with maybe better eye discipline. If they're running the ball with great success, it's just so hard with that play action to really, really nail in and kind of constrict this Notre Dame offense.
That's why Tommy Eichenberg is just so important, man. Like, if you can keep the running game with 4 or 5, you're going to have a lot of success against Notre Dame. Teams haven't been able to do that yet. Navy, Tennessee State, Central Michigan, like they're not going to be able to do that to a Notre Dame. Can Ohio State? That's what I want to know. That's why also, Andy, why one of my keys to the game that I brought up in the story was that you have to make sure that they're in 2nd and 9. If they're in 2nd and 4 all game, you're gonna have to scratch your head and wonder, okay, is this run pass? Is this play action? Are they gonna come at us with Estime again? If you're in 2nd and 9 and 3rd and 9, if you're up 7-0 and there's an early 3rd and 8, I don't think Notre Dame's running the ball there. I think you're gonna be able to pin your ears back and try to get at Sam Hartman. If you're at 3rd and 3, then you have to wonder, hey, what are they gonna do? The call gets much more complicated, and that's football 101, but also in this type of game where Hartman can pick you apart unless you know that he's throwing the ball, which at Wake, he was throwing the ball a lot, and that led to a lot of interceptions. He's 41 career interceptions. His 49 career starts, 10 of them, he has multiple interceptions. So, I mean, this is a guy who is prone to doing those things in obvious passing downs. He's prone to doing those things when he has to throw into tight windows. Nobody's made him do that yet. So, like, if you can keep Notre Dame at 2nd and 9 and 3rd and 7 and even 2nd and 7, you're going to have a much higher success rate against a quarterback like this than if you're in 3rd and short constantly and trying to battle uphill to keep them behind the chains.
Yeah, I think the turnover discussion is really interesting because I'm sure we'll get into it, I guess, now, because you're on record saying you think that Ohio State, or your bold prediction, I will say, is that Ohio State. Well, I guess we'll tease that. I guess we're teasing that. But you think, I won't say how many, but you think that Ohio State's going to force some turnovers. And I think the question is with Sam Hartman, like, what do you look at? Do you look at the Wake tape and do you see that he's prone, which I agree with. He certainly was in his 5 years at Wake Forest. There were games, obvious one is the ACC championship against Pittsburgh, where he just didn't have it. And 1 interception turned to 2 and 2 turned to 3. And suddenly Wake was out of the game and the ACC championship game was over. He had games like that. He also had fantastic games against ranked opponents. The one that I think of is the Clemson game in 2021, that same season in which he dueled DJ Uiagalelei, and it was a back and forth battle in that game. So there are games where he's shown up in big-time moments and games where he's greater in big-time moments. But the problem is that was a Wake mesh offense that just looks so different from this Notre Dame pro-style offense, and they asked him to do way more at Wake than they do at Notre Dame, and he's got way more talent around him at Notre Dame than he does at Wake Forest, namely that running game, like we said, that just supports him, and it just makes things easier for him. They're not asking him to do as much, and he's able to throw guys open. And so I guess what I wonder is, you know, like you said, that you got to take away those things that are helping him right now. You got to take away the run game. You got to force him into those positions where he has to be Sam Hartman from Wake. And then it's a 50-50, like which one you're going to get. The really good Sam Hartman from Wake or the not so great. So I agree with you. They got to force him into those uncomfortable positions.
Yeah, I look at that stretch in 2021. It's at North Carolina, home against NC State, at Clemson, at Boston College, and then the ACC championship game against Pittsburgh. He goes 2 interceptions, 3 interceptions, 1 interception, one, and then 4 in that championship game, like you said. And like the 4 is okay, whatever. Like you ran a shootout with Kenny Pickett, and it got a little sideways. I think that was the fake slide game too. Just incredible content, great college football memories. But like I'm looking in particular at the North Carolina and the NC State game. Like those are two defenses. North Carolina's not a great defense, and I think they were just kind of chucking it around. That game might have even been like a 58-55, just like absolute banger
I
of a
think that
game.
was super high scoring. And you know what was interesting about
It,
that game? It was non-conference. It didn't even count.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
it was 58-55. I just looked it up. It's 58-55. So okay, he throws 2 interceptions in that game. Whatever. He scored 55 points. Who cares? Or he scored 58. The one that I look at is the NC State one because like there are multiple games against NC State which runs a very complicated defense. You know who else runs a complicated defense? Jim Knowles. And they forced 3 Sam Hartman interceptions, and it's not the first time that NC State got him with turnovers. So I'm not gonna. Yeah, he played another game where he had 3 turnovers against NC State. Like I'm not saying that. He's going to go out and completely lay an egg at home in prime time when he's a Heisman candidate. What I am saying is he's not afraid to turn 1 turnover into 2. He's not just because he throws a pick, he ain't gonna stop. So if you're Ohio State, like if you get that momentum and you get that turnover, be ready because he may be willing to take another chance that you can capitalize on. He also had a strip sack fumble early in that NC State game that in 2023, just 2 weeks ago, that almost went NC State's direction. So like if you get pressure on him, he's known to hold the ball. That's one of his defining traits is like he will hold it long enough to find the open receiver. He will also hold it long enough to take a bad sack. And so, all of this discussion leads to it just leads back to that Ohio State front 7. If the secondary makes him hold on to the ball, the front 7 is going to have a lot of opportunities.
Yeah. But it's such an interesting conversation because on the other hand, right, Ohio State's defense last year, 18 total takeaways, 10 of those came in 2 games. I think they had 6 against Iowa and then 4 against Penn State back-to-back weeks. And then besides that, they were kind of takeaway starved. I mean, they had a crucial one against Georgia with Steele Chambers coming up with that interception that helped them take a 21-7 lead. But for a big-time defense and Jim Knowles' defense, which used to be predicated on wreaking havoc, now it's less so. I just wonder how consistent can they be with forcing takeaways? Obviously, you had 4 against Western Kentucky. That is Western Kentucky, a potent group of 5 offense. What does that look like on a consistent basis? They had 0 week 1, they had 1 week 2, and then 4 last week. Is this a defense that's going to be takeaway hungry? Are they going to be forcing turnovers and creating these takeaways week after week? Or was that a one-off last week? Do we see 0 for a couple weeks in a row? Like, that's what I'm wondering. As much as Sam Hartman might be prone to interceptions in past years, again, he's got 0 through 4 games this year. He's 13 touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Let's be clear about that. Is this Ohio State defense going to build off of last week and forcing 4 turnovers? Or is this going to go back to maybe what it was last year where we had weeks on end without any?
And it also, is Ohio State going to make him play from behind where he feels like he has to fit something in where it doesn't belong, and then he throws an interception? Is Ohio State going to play from ahead where he doesn't have time because Ohio State can kind of pin its ears back and take a couple risks on defense? That's the goal here for Ohio State. Jim Knowles, hey, you're the offense, build me a lead. I'm going to pin my ears back and be aggressive. If Ohio State can do that, then, oh, man, Ryan Day and Jim Knowles will sign up for that any day because they are going to love that because that will lead to, I think it definitively will lead to Sam Hartman turnovers if he has to take more risks because this defense has been very good in coverage. It's been very good, down the field with this secondary. So Yeah, man. I'm not saying. I'm just asking the questions. Like, how much how much stock do we put into 5 years? I mean, like a couple years is one thing. Like 5 years of data that say like, okay, if this guy is pressured and if he's playing from behind, I know that it's Wake and I know it's not the same. I promise I understand that, but I also understand that that stuff doesn't just get beat out of you. You look at quarterbacks across the country, like guys who turn the ball over, they just turn the ball over. And there are 10 games of multiple interceptions, and a lot of those he's trailing or he's trying to make a play where it's not. And in this type of game, in this high pressure environment where every single one of the 11 that's on the field for Ohio State, no, 10 of the 11, Davison Igbinosun, the lone exception, and he played in a really good SEC last year, have all played Georgia and all know what that's like in that high pressure environment. And so I just like I think that Ohio State has a chance here to be the aggressor on defense, even if Notre Dame has the edge when it comes to quarterback.
It doesn't always have to be interceptions too, right? You can force fumbles. Denzel Burke did it last week, putting his helmet in there, forcing the ball loose. And look, you got some young players in this Notre Dame offense. I mentioned Jeremiah Love. He's kind of their running back too, although they have kind of a committee beneath Audric Estime, but he's a young player as well. Jeremiah Love is. And then Jaden Greathouse is a freshman wide receiver for Notre Dame. Like, you got opportunities in a big time moment. Maybe you get a punch the ball loose, your strip sack, maybe a Sam Hartman. Like, there's other ways to create some turnovers. Maybe it's on special teams. Like, maybe we see a special teams game-changing play. Of course, it was a special teams player in Xavier Johnson that made an impact on offense in last year's meeting, getting that go-ahead touchdown. But maybe we see a true special teams play, whether it's in the return game, coverage game, or whatnot, to make a difference. Like, there's all sorts of ways in these matchup games to make an impact. And I guess I'm kind of watching for which one of those unexpected, maybe X factor players makes a play like that.
Yeah, it's never the guy that you expect in an Ohio State big game, right? It's always somebody that you just don't expect. Last year was Xavier Johnson. Like if you told me Xavier Johnson caught the game-winning touchdown against Notre Dame, I would have called you an idiot, like just a straight up idiot. And he does it. He goes out and does it. It's who's it going to be? You always try to find the guy, and you always want to be the guy who's right. But it's so hard to pick that person because all of those weapons from last year. It starts with Jackson Smith and Jigba, then it goes to maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. is as good as he was in the Rose Bowl because we didn't know at that time. Maybe Emeka Ibuka is going to take a step forward as a sophomore. Little did we know he almost had as many yards as Marvin. Maybe it's going to be Julian Fleming finally in year 3 breaking out. No, you all thought, but it's Xavier Johnson, and like it could be Xavier Johnson again. It could be Evan Pryor. It could be Chip Trayanum. Uh, who knows? It could be G. Scott Jr., who I picked to be the offensive player of the game last week, and he played well, but he didn't have the impact of being a player of the game. Like you just don't in these types of games. Like Steve Miller, Ohio State fans in the comments absolutely know who Steve Miller is. Like the one of the defining heroes of the Sugar Bowl against Alabama. And the other day I was talking to one of the players on that team, and I was like, hey, we were looking at the picture of Steve Miller celebrating the end zone. I said, where's Steve Miller now? He's like, I don't know. Like, I haven't heard from him. So, like, it's just those types of games, man. They just bring out, like, the unknown star. And if Ohio State has the unknown star, then, Ohio State's going to win. Maybe Notre Dame does. But somebody is going to make a play that you just do not see coming.
Yeah, I mean, it could be anyone. It could be maybe like a Carnell Tate randomly scoring a go-ahead touchdown. Maybe it's like a Cody Simon when they have a 3 linebacker set and they're trying to stop that Notre Dame run game. Maybe he punches the ball loose. Like, you just don't know, but you're right. It's always someone you're not expecting. I mean, we're going to watch us say that and then watch it be like Marvin Harrison Jr. that erupts
yeah.
4 touchdowns or whatever. But hey, I mean, if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. But it's definitely the most exciting thing I think about these games is that you never really know. And you get so many underdog storylines, whether it's the team that's not supposed to win or even the team that is supposed to win, someone making an impact that they aren't supposed to.
Andy, we are in the final 10 minutes. Beginning of the week, I asked you like what your lean was. You said Ohio State. Not going to spoil anything for the predictions tomorrow. Staff picks will be on the site at some point tomorrow. Not going to spoil bold predictions, but like just It's 7:19 on the East Coast. We are 48 hours and 11 minutes from kickoff. What I'm gonna turn this on me too. Like, what's your gut telling you right now? How are you feeling? I guess.
Yeah, still leaning Ohio State. Again, I won't give that score. You'll have to go to lettermenrow.com to see that tomorrow. Watch our bold predictions video. It's coming out tomorrow as well. But, I'm leaning in Ohio State just because I do think that this team has more talent than Notre Dame. And I think that sometimes on the road, talent just can trump the atmosphere that you're going up against. I also think that the road atmosphere can help Ohio State. I mean, we were talking about this week. Teams come into the shoe all the time, energized. Youngstown State scored on its opening drive. I mean, that was electric. They were feeding off that energy. Um, I mean, look at that. I mean, the little Waddle celebration in the end zone. No, but for real, like teams will use that to their own advantage. Ohio State uses that when it goes to Happy Valley and they play Penn State in the whiteout game. I mean, that can feed your own team on the road. And I think that for Ohio State, that works in their favor as well. I think that this is going to be a good game, though. I really don't think this is going to be a blowout. I think that Notre Dame is for real. I think that even if they lose this game, they're going to be in the college football playoff conversation, at least for a while. I think that Sam Hartman is a very good quarterback. I don't personally think he's going to make too many of those big mistakes. I think that Ohio State's going to have to really methodically drive the ball down the field and execute when it matters most. But I anticipate that this will be a close game that will come down to the fourth quarter.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I was originally going to pick a two-score win for Ohio State, like a 10 or 11. But the only reason that I was starting to lean that way was because if Ryan Day gets the chance, I think he would add a touchdown at the end, or kick a field goal to make it a two-possession game with a minute 23 to go. You know what I'm trying to say? Like I think that you still could get that. I think that's in the realm of possibility for Ohio State to walk out of there with a 10 or a 14-point win, and you look and say, wow, that was a classic game. That was a very close game that Ohio State just happened to have the ball with 2 minutes to go. So it's like, that's my lean right now. It's like, I think Ohio State's going to win this game. And the pick will be out at lettermenrow.com tomorrow. I'm super excited, though. Like, that's, again, like we led the show off, like, this is why we cover Ohio State. Like, this is why we do what we do. Like, to be honest, like, peel back the curtain, like, this is why, somebody like you who's covering your alma mater, chooses to cover Ohio State instead. Like, Ohio State, Notre Dame, not only is it a helmet game, but, like, it's just one you have to be at. Like, it's one that everybody wants to be at. And like, there's a lot of people talking about Oregon, Colorado, and Florida State, Clemson, and other games around the country. But, like, there's no place in the world I'd rather be on Saturday night than Notre Dame Stadium.
Yeah, it's a banner week for college football after a pretty weak week, I would say, of a slate of games last week. I mean, some were better than others that we expected. But I think this is the week that everyone's kind of circling and being like, this is the first real legit CFP implications game week where you're trying to look at it and be like, okay, who's a pretender? Who is a contender? And that is these two teams right now. Like, not everyone is buying in on Notre Dame yet. Not everyone is buying on Ohio State yet. Ohio State started the season at number 3 in the polls. They're number 6. They're on the outside looking in of pretty much every major bowl projection right now for the CFP. Teams that are ahead of them, like Florida State, and you look at even like Oregon is rising up all the rankings. Like, people are buying in on some other programs right now that aren't typically in that top grouping of the Georgias and the likes of those kinds of programs. Ohio State needs to make a statement, and it doesn't need to be like a 2-3 score win, but they need to do enough to at least show, hey, we're in this group of 4 that can make the CFP again. And I win this game to do that, because if you don't, you're looking at a tough uphill battle. You got to win out at that point, and that includes beating Michigan, of course, which they've lost to the last 2 years.
Man, had to throw that one at the end there, huh?
It's just context. Like, look, if they lose this game, like you got to win out. You got to win, and you got to do it with some style points too, especially if Notre Dame slips off and doesn't have the season we think they might have. Like, if Notre Dame wins this game and then kind of craters and ends up being like a 9-win team, then you really have to play well the rest of the way and almost, beat teams pretty decisively, even like a, 10-point win over like a Penn State. not like a 1-score, 3-score, or 3-point win or whatever. Like, it's got to be convincing the rest of the way after that.
Andy, let's do some rapid fire before we get out of here. Florida State, Clemson, you got to lean?
Florida State. I'm just not in on this Dabo Swinney post. I don't care about the transfer portal, but in an NIL world, no. Florida State.
Yeah, I think Florida State as well. I don't care that it's at Clemson. Who else we got in here? Oh, Alabama, Ole Miss, the Lane Kiffin Bowl. Is the castle crumbling for real?
I feel like Alabama's going to win this game, but it's going to be like pretty close and entertaining. I don't know. Jackson Dart's really fun to watch, man. I think that program is just fun in general usually, but I think it's going to come down to the wire. I think Alabama gets out of it, stays alive for another week, but this is coming down fast. It's like what we saw with Clemson, but just a year delayed, I feel like.
You think Tuscaloosa Zebras are gonna help them out a little bit?
I guess we'll see.
Washington State, Oregon State. Our Beavs. Lettermen Row's Beavs.
Tristan Gebbia
against
Beavs.
Washington State. Yeah. The two-pack game. Who's gonna win?
Yeah, Oregon State, I think, for me. I mean, this Pac-12 is so fun. I mentioned Oregon earlier because I think that, they're honestly a contender for the CFP as well. I guess we'll get to that Colorado game. But, yeah, I'm leaning Oregon State in this one.
Yeah, me too. I think Oregon State's going to win. I think Oregon State's got a chance to go to the New Year's Six, which how cool would that be? Like just a big, fat middle finger to everyone in the Pac-12. Look at us in the New Year's Six while you guys are all playing in your holiday bowls and your Las Vegas Jimmy Kimmel bowls. Look at us. I think that's going to be awesome.
It's awesome, but also like sad because like where do you go after that? And so
not going to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to ask you if Iowa's going to beat Penn State. Is Iowa going to score?
Oh yeah, they're going to score, but they're not going to score as much as they did last week. I'll tell you that. I think honestly, Iowa's your Big Ten West pick, right?
They are my Big Ten West pick, but I only picked them because I'm not a Wisconsin believer and everyone else sucks.
Right. Yeah. No, I don't think this game's going to be close at all. But I guess Iowa, I'll give them 17 points.
Wow, 17. That's 2 whole touchdowns. That's a lot for Bry Guy and the Hawkeyes. I got some betting plays that I wrote down. Before we get to those, though, real quick, Oregon, Colorado.
Yeah, Oregon, and I think it'll be fun but not close. I'm saying maybe a 48 to 34 kind of game. I think there'll be a lot of scoring. I think it'll be entertaining, fun, but I think Oregon's gonna pull it out ultimately.
Yeah, I think Oregon's gonna win, and I think Oregon's gonna score oodles of points. The Oregon team total over 45 kicks us off on the sticky note. Oregon team total over 45.5. I'm gonna kind of spray the board here. UCLA plus 5.5 on the road with a true freshman quarterback at Rice Eccles against Utah. Cam Rising coming back for the first game. Since he tore his ACL in the Rose Bowl, I think he's going to be a little rusty. I'll take Dante Moore, and I'll take those points. 5.5 UCLA covers. Taking Louisiana Lafayette minus 9.5. Buffalo is terrible. I mean, awful. That is a bad, bad football team. Bet them while Vegas still hasn't adjusted. UCLA, Arizona State, over 61.5. I'm not going to take the spread because it's massive, 34.5 point spread. Maybe it's 42 to set, or maybe it's 65 to something that covers that 35 point spread. I don't trust Alex Grinch enough, but I also know that Arizona State is on its 4th string quarterback. It's got 10 starters out already. They're limping to the finish line, and it's only September 21st. It's over 61.5 in USC, Arizona State. And then the final play. Check the bottom of the screen. I'm not picking Rutgers to beat Michigan, but I will tell you this. 24.5 is a lot in a Big Ten game. There have been times where Ohio State's been a 25-point favorite, 27-point favorite, and I say no. Take those points. Even if they lose, even if that bet loses, you just that's too many points in a Big Ten game. Rutgers is undefeated. feeling good about themselves. Plus the 24.5, Rutgers against Michigan.
This is a dream because I had a dream once, or I thought I was having a dream when I woke up in 2020 during that terrible year, and Michigan was playing Rutgers, and it was in triple overtime, and Rutgers had them on the ropes. Like, I thought I was asleep. I was like, this is not happening. I wonder if something happens like that again. It would be really just bizarre to see something like that again. I don't think it will. I think that Michigan wins this game. But it's fun to talk about. Rutgers, hey, you got to tip your hat to them. 3-0 start. Looks like they're at least trending in the right direction for a bowl under Greg Schiano, a bowl that they actually are in this time, not a bowl that they just end up playing in because of COVID. So, we'll see. But Rutgers, yeah, trending up. Kudos to them. We'll be in Piscataway later this year, so sharing in some of that joy.
We'll be able to go to Stuff Your Face, get a Stromboli, watch the Scarlet Knights and Buckeyes square off first week of November. Until then, though, we're going to keep covering the Buckeyes. We're going to do it in South Bend on Saturday. Andy, man, I cannot wait. It's going to be so fun. Ohio State, Notre Dame, number 6 versus number 9. Notre Dame Stadium, South Bend, Indiana. Can't wait to get over there with you. Can't wait to cover that game with you. And Tim May, Matt Parker down on the field for the photo side of things. We'll have it full coverage at LettermenRow.com. Thanks for tuning in the second week of the Lettermen Live Show. We're having a great time doing it. We'll see you guys next Thursday. Doesn't matter that it's a bye week. We'll be back on Thursday. Make sure you, when you see the video says upcoming, make sure you hit the little notification. Then you'll get a notification when we go live. It's too easy not to.